Are you tired of the cookie-cutter approach to education that's stuck in the last century? Are you seeking a win-win situation where your family thrives, your kid's education is revolutionary, and you still get to chase your own dreams? Welcome to Unschooled Unleashed. Unlock your child's genius. I'm your host, Matthew Jarecki, an unapologetic rebel dad and promoter of what many consider to be educational anarchy. You know the world isn't going to be won by those that just toe the line. It's the innovators, the visionaries, and the resilient spirits that are going to thrive. Our mission here is to forge those world changers within our very homes with less stress, energy, and time. Unschooled Unleashed starts now. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Unschooled Unleashed. I'm your host, Matthew Jarecki, and today we're going to talk about personal responsibility. We're diving into how to encourage personal responsibility in your children. I just want to say start as young as possible. Age-appropriate stuff, but start as young as possible. I think we're starting to see now that I have an almost 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old, they really do take responsibility for their actions for the most part. And when they don't, it's a little disappointing, a little disheartening to me, but kids make mistakes. And it's so nice to see them turn around the next day and actually accept responsibility, personal responsibility, meaning their actions affect, their choices, their actions affect the downstream, that there's consequences, good and bad, productive, unproductive, however you want to say it. So I think this is a really vital skill to teach children because we're preparing them to be adults. But I don't want to go too much into it because I'm going to start hitting my bullet points that I want to cover in the episode. So with that, let's dive in. Today we're going to talk about how to nurture personal responsibility in your children. I think this is something that we can actively promote, and I don't want to go as far as to say as control whether they have personal responsibility, because that's not up to us, but we can certainly do a lot of things that will help them develop that sense of personal responsibility. This goes back to their actions, decisions, and even consequences that you allow. And I think this is going to provide a sense of confidence and maturity in your children. So I think it's very important. So the purpose of this episode is to help you instill personal responsibility in your children through practical steps, empower your children to take ownership of their actions, build independence, and develop decision-making skills, as well as explore how unschooling principles align with teaching personal responsibility. So first thing I want to talk about is why personal responsibility is a crucial skill for children. And really it goes back to why it's a crucial skill for adults, because we're raising little adults. Future adults, we should say. And again, this is something we can't make happen, but we certainly can stack the deck in the favor of them developing that sense of personal responsibility. Well, first, why personal responsibility is a crucial skill for children. Life skills for success is personal responsibility. A life skill for success is personal responsibility. I'm tongue-tied today. It's been a long day for me. But I'm still here doing it because I have personal responsibility. Because I said I'd get a podcast out Monday morning, and here I am getting it out. After a long shift, couple shifts in a row at the hospital, still doing it, even after all this. And I'm only got 3.5 hours sleep last night, all this craziness. But for you guys, there's a number of you out there who really seem to appreciate this content, and I really appreciate you, and I want to make sure I show up for you on a consistent basis. Anyways, personal responsibility is a life skill. So responsibility prepares kids for adulthood by teaching them accountability, time management, and decision making. That sounds like a good deal to me. If we're raising little adults, little future adults, then those are three crucial skills you really want them to build: accountability, time management, decision making. They're going to give them plenty of opportunity to make these decisions, and I just think it's a great skill to build. In fact, I think it's essential for building self-confidence and the ability to navigate real-world challenges. When you're able to hold yourself accountable, your brain knows that you're going to follow through. It actually builds confidence when you're able to hold yourself accountable. And as far as navigating real world challenges, I think it's the more practice, the better, and that's why this is able to build it. I think it's also a foundation for independence. Personal responsibility helps children become self-reliant and independent thinkers. And I think in 2024, going into 2025, independent thinking is absolutely necessary for the future, for our next generation. And I mean, it allowing them to learn personal responsibility enables them to handle complex tasks that require a lot of thought, solve different problems that they might have in their lives or around them, and take initiative without relying on others. And I think this is, in the future, as we look to independent contractors and entrepreneurs being the majority of the workforce in the United States by the end of the decade, at least if it's on the, it's about half now. It's close to half of the U.S. workforce is an entrepreneur or an independent contractor. Even that, taking responsibility for your own problems, learning how to handle those things, those problems, and not relying on others to tell you what to do because you take responsibility for it and try and figure it out, I think is a skill worth building. I also think that personal responsibility builds trust and respect because taking responsibility for your actions earns trust from those around you, including, when it's your kids, parents, peers, anyone that they interact with, because they know they're going to handle their stuff. This sense of responsibility fosters that self-respect that they need and strengthens their social relationships. So they kind of get an identity of being a trustworthy person, someone who's going to follow through. And I think that's good to instill in our children while they're young. But I think it's crucial for children to start to build this skill. And I've focused quite a bit of my energy on building this skill in my children. So let's dive into some of the details on how we can actually pass on, hopefully, personal responsibility to our children. And that's modeling responsibility as a parent. Children mirror adult behaviors. When they see you doing something, they're probably going to do it. That's how we've taught for the entire human existence, is modeling the people we have around us, at least at the formative early years. Kids observe how we manage our own responsibilities, whether it's work, household duties, or even handling emotions. And what I propose we do is show our children that being responsible is a part of everyday life. That when we follow through and we show them that we take things seriously in our lives, including with them, then they know personal responsibility is just to be expected. At least that's one way. We also need to admit when we're wrong. We need to admit our mistakes. When parents make mistakes, admitting them openly models accountability for your children. When you say, I'm not perfect and it's okay not to be perfect, and I'm going to own up to it and do better next time, that's me taking responsibility and modeling it for them, and they're going to be much more likely to do it themselves. It also teaches that kids can just learn from their mistakes, just like adults do. That's how we learn. We learn from mistakes. That mistakes should be encouraged, not like the target or the goal, but finding a mistake is one step closer to a success. Also, modeling responsibility as a parent can be involving your kids in adult responsibilities. This can be involving them in household responsibilities to show them how you as the parent manage those tasks. This can be anything from home maintenance to maybe scheduling something out, or making sure dinner's on the table, the dog's fed, stuff like that, budgeting, anything like that you can involve them with, is going to show them that there are responsibilities that adults have and that they need to be prepared. And they're adults in training, so teach them these skills. Encourage them to help with the simple tasks along the way. And it might even just be as simple as organizing a room or taking care of a younger sibling. That's something we actually do, is have the older kids help out with the younger kids. This is something that they did many years ago when they would have 10 children. There was no way to parent all those 10 children, so they had the older ones care for the younger ones. And that was pretty routine up until when we started having fewer kids, the Industrial Revolution, both parents working, all that stuff. Moving on. Assigning age-appropriate responsibilities is the next topic. So we want to start small. If you have young children, introduce young children to simple tasks such as just picking up the toys after they're done playing. Trust me, that's enough. You know, if you have young kids, that trying to get your kids to put away everything once they're done playing with it is almost an impossible task. But if you really do focus in on it, they get the idea. One of the things we've done is we make, if they didn't clean up, a barrier to moving on to the next activity. So they might want to play with Legos or something, but yet they got blankets and pillows and some other toys strewn all over the living room. I say no. And then they say, well, why not? I say, well, look at the room. It's not cleaned up. I don't tell them why unless they ask. I just say no. And then what happens is they, at least if you do this as a routine, they start to actually clean up their mess before they even ask. So I don't even have to do it. They just take responsibility for it themselves. Again, it doesn't always happen. They make a lot of mistakes, and sometimes I have to go back and check. And sometimes they even put the onus on them to make sure that they come to me beforehand, because if they come to me a couple times and I see that the mess isn't cleaned up before they want to move on to the next task, and I'm in the middle of something or in another room, I say, no, not yet. I actually have to check because you guys have not checked before you come to me the last couple times. That usually, that waiting, it usually makes them, I don't know, in my head, it makes them think about it, solidifies that they actually need to go back and clean up and look on their own. Otherwise, they're going to have to wait for dad to go over and check, as opposed to, yeah, sure, as long as everything's cleaned up, guys. So that's one way we've been able to do it. I do think that there needs to be a building, a gradual progression of age-appropriate responsibilities. And you can increase the responsibilities as they get older, moving from small, little manageable things to more complex things like cooking family meals, let's say. I think gradually allowing them to handle more significant decisions in their life and around the house, like managing their own time for practicing an extracurricular activity, or maybe studying something that they really want to, talk about with, with a group of people, or, whatever it might be, whatever they're motivated by at the time, that they go over and plan it out and manage that stuff. Again, you're going to need to remind them. However, the goal is to hand that off to them and just make sure it's age appropriate, because if you try and hand it off too soon, you're not going to have much luck. Which leads me to my next point, which is make it manageable. So break larger tasks into smaller steps to avoid overwhelming them. You don't want them to be scared of responsibility. You want them to believe they can handle it, because they can handle it. They just might need it in smaller chunks. So, for example, instead of saying your room needs to be completely clean, guide them through the specific tasks like, well, your clothes are out, the floor's a mess, You left out all your stuffed animals. You didn't make your bed. All this stuff needs to be handled. Breaking it up into those smaller tasks at times helps them put the bullseye on exactly what they need to do. Because just saying clean your entire room might seem very overwhelming. And I wouldn't suggest maybe saying everything all at once either. You might go over and say, well, the floor looks like it's the next priority. You might want to clean the floor. And eventually when you're repeating this stuff over and over and over again, they'll eventually get what tasks need to be done to, quote unquote, have a clean room. I do think consistency is key. Regularly assigning tasks helps build discipline and responsibility, and it ensures that responsibilities become a part of their daily life or weekly life, their routine, so they develop consistent habits. We've handed off laundry to our 2 oldest boys, who are 10 and 9, and every other day they have to go do the laundry. One of them has to do the laundry. So every 4 days, one of them's doing the laundry. That might be more than one load. You know, we got a lot of people, a lot of clothes, a lot of stuff, and they have to manage it within their day. I don't want to go into the accountability of it. I'll bring that up here in a minute. But when it gives them an opportunity to do something that is an adult responsibility, it's age appropriate, but also allowing them to manage it allows them to fail. And they learn a better routine, a better habit, because they're going to learn from their consequences. And with that, let's jump into the teaching accountability through natural consequences. So when I talk about natural consequences, what I'm talking about is allowing children to experience the natural consequences of their actions. Or, maybe simpler said, if there is something as a result of their action, if there's anything that might happen as a result of their action, you allow that to happen and maybe highlight it, okay? Tying it very closely to their actions. That's the key thing. Rather, or a punishment might be, let's contrast it with that. A punishment might be you're grounded, has no connection to what they're doing. Like they talked back, okay, you're grounded. Whereas a consequence of their action might be they talked back and you say, you know what, I don't like the way you're talking to people. I don't want you around anyone when you can't control your mouth. I'd like you to go have a seat at the table. Or I don't want you in the same room as everyone else. We're not arbitrarily assigning something. We're explaining, hey, look, this is a problem and I need to make sure there's peace in this house. So as a result of that, of your action, we're going to do this to prevent any more chaos. Or this is what would happen in the real world. I've often used that when I say, if you, there's a sibling hitting or something like that, and I say, you do that in the real world, you will go to jail. So it's appropriate to go over and have them go in their back room when they do this, in their bedroom, and sit by themselves, because that's what prison's like. And I make sure that that's very clear, that if you can't control your body, even though your emotions are going crazy, if you can't control your body, this is what's going to happen to you as an adult. And that's a natural consequence. Also, as far as teaching accountability through natural consequences, I encourage ownership. So when children take responsibility for their actions, they learn how their decisions affect their outcomes. So they own their actions. You have to allow them to own their actions. They can't make excuses, and if they make excuses, focus on that they made a decision somewhere. Yeah, they might have a habit and they did it without thinking. That means it's gone too far, right? But there still was a decision somewhere along the way that led to this result. And that was a choice. Now, if it isn't their choice, you can focus in on how bad things happen. But almost all the time, there's an action that led to a result, and this is a consequence of it. And highlighting that's very important. And the reason is because we need to connect those dots between their choices and the results of and the results that they experience. Because if they don't see that connection, then their choices don't matter. So they'll just do, for lack of a better term, hedonistic stuff. They're going to be selfish. They're going to do whatever they want. They're not going to think of others. That is what we don't want. On that, teaching accountability through natural consequences, we need to resist the urge to fix everything. Okay? As parents, we naturally want to protect our kids from discomfort, but sometimes stepping back and allowing those natural consequences to happen is the best lesson. It's when those neural pathways are formed. So when they face setbacks, it teaches them to critically think and solve problems on their own, like how to avoid this in the future. I try and talk my kids through it a lot of times, but if they're not getting it, sometimes I just let the consequences play out. And sometimes that happens over and over and over again. And I just point out, I'm like, how long are you going to let this happen? You keep on making the same choices. You're getting the same result. Until you make different choices, you have to act differently. You have to do something different. You're going to get the same consequences. But I let them figure it out. I try and give them as much guidance, like walking alongside them, as I can, without solving it for them, because they need to solve it themselves. I just point out by connecting the dots, hey, this isn't working. Here's what I do. Here's what I see mommy do. Here's what I see other people doing. And I try and frame it like that as opposed to telling them what to do. Moving on, encouraging problem solving instead of providing solutions. That's a nice little segue, right? So we're guiding, not solving. I kind of went into this a little bit. When your child encounters a problem, guide them to find a solution rather than offering the answer right away. You can ask open-ended questions. So what do you think you should do next? That's an example. Or what could you try differently? All of these things are going to hopefully get those gears turning. But put it on them. Don't let them put it back on you. They will try and put it back on you. And that's because they just don't want to think. They just don't want to solve this problem. They might not know. It might be a really big, intimidating thing. And that's okay. They need to figure it out. Again, walk alongside them, try and connect dots, but allow them to come up with a solution. Don't tell them they're wrong either. Let them try their bad solutions and let them see in the real world whether that works. One of my kids kept on forgetting to take the dog out. We had a puppy about a year ago, and we still have the dog, but it was a puppy a year ago. And the dog needed to go out every hour. And we were trying to teach personal responsibility to one of my kids, and they just could not remember to follow through with taking the dog out. So I actually put them in charge of making sure the dog gets out every hour. And he had to figure out all these different ways to be able to make sure he remembers. He tried everything, and he still struggles to this day. He's just, I struggle with this too, is remembering something without a reminder. But he tried reminders. He tried putting little notes all across the house to remind him to do it. He tried, just everything under the sun. What he eventually ended up doing was setting a timer, and he came up with that himself. That's the first thing I would have gone to personally, but he had to see that all these things that he wanted to do, he had to see it play out in the real world, whether it worked or not. Otherwise, they're not going to build the confidence that they can actually figure this out. You have to let them try. So another point I want to make on encouraging problem solving instead of providing solutions is teaching critical thinking. Encourage your child to analyze situations and weigh possible solutions. By doing this, you're teaching them how to approach challenges methodically, fostering independence and confidence in their problem-solving abilities. So when you teach them, when you're encouraging them to analyze the situation and weigh possible solutions, you'll often hear that they don't know, or there's only one way. And what I often say to my kids is, no, there's actually at least 3 options. I will not accept any less than 3 options They might be 3 bad options, like horrible options, possible solutions to your problems that you don't want to do. But you are able to come up with at least 3 in every scenario. I've never found that to be false. Anytime you can box yourself into 1, maybe 2 options, then you're really just boxing yourself in. You have to remember that there's always at least 3 options, and there's likely 4 options or more with any given scenario. They might be bad ones again, but there's at least that many. And sometimes this is a little ambiguous when I explain this, but I'll give an example. So for example, I say, I'm running late to work. I don't want to be late. So here are my options. I have 1, I can speed to work. Some might say that's the only option, right? But there's at least 3, right? So let's see if I can do this on the spot. Another option might be, I drive sanely and I'm just late. Hey, doesn't sound like a great option, but it is an option. 3, let's see. I could have someone drive me to work, so that way I don't need to go over and park in the parking garage and they can just drop me off. Hey, there's an option. See, there's always at least 3. And that was just me off the top of my head doing that. Again, might not be good options, but I do have 3. Could Uber it. That's another option. Moving on. Actually, I have one more point I want to make for encouraging problem solving as opposed to providing solutions. Is I just want to emphasize this again. I keep saying it, but you got to allow room for mistakes. It's okay if they choose a solution that doesn't work the first time. Let them make these mistakes. They learn from it. I think I already talked enough about that. I go over my notes sometimes and I have everything in my head that I want to say, and then I bring it up. I get ahead of myself. It's part of the fun of the podcast, trying to keep me on the linear path when my brain does not work like that. We all have gifts or curses, depending on how you look at it. Anyways, next thing I want to talk about is building intrinsic motivation. If you have intrinsic motivation, you are going to follow through. You're going to hold yourself accountable because you're the one driving it. So what I would suggest is shifting away from external rewards and instead focus on intrinsic motivation, something that comes from within. This is how we do things in unschooling, right? If you personally want something, you're going to go after it. You're going to learn more. You're going to absorb it faster. You're going to probably be better at it than if you were forced to do it. It's not that sometimes there's a reward on the other end, but offering a reward isn't what I would say should be the goal. Otherwise, there's an external motivator, right? I think we should encourage our children in their accomplishments and celebrate those, because there's something weird that happens. I was just listening to a podcast, or maybe it was a book or something, I can't remember. But once we go over and get a win, even if it's a small win, it propels us into the next win. So this is where the whole theory of just make your bed in the morning, that's a win. That propels you to the next one, and then the next one. And then you have this habit of winning, and your brain actually shifts the way it views the world into you can do something and you can affect the world as opposed to you can't. And it's weird because it starts out with little small wins. And once you start getting those, there's momentum and it builds up. So worth doing. By the way, focus and acknowledge their hard work and perseverance rather than just the final result of whether they did it or not. There's pride in trying and failing and learning that lesson. Keep that mindset that values the learning process and owning the responsibility within it. And I think that's going to really help them. I already talked about some of this stuff. I'll just lightly touch on it. Let kids take ownership of their tasks. Give them their autonomy to take ownership and feel a true sense of accomplishment. That's the only way they're going to build confidence. Moving on. The role of unschooling in teaching responsibility. So self-directed learning equals responsibility, right? They're going to have that intrinsic motivation and be naturally propelled forward to take control of anything in life, including their education. They're going to, in unschooling, you have to learn how to manage your time, areas of interest, follow through on, projects, learning things that you want to do, just the different stuff they want to learn about. And I think this is a great skill that's built particularly because of unschooling. And that's one of the reasons I chose it, is because it really, you have to get to know yourself, and then you're going to have to take action based on intrinsic motivation. I think that's a good skill to have. You're going to hold yourself accountable, you're going to make progress, and you get to own all your own wins, as opposed to someone going over and saying, do this or I'm going to fail you, or it's going to be on your permanent record. Yeah. Plus, it allows them to build some independence early. I think that's great. And if they're able to handle responsibilities in their life, personal accountability, then good. They're more mature. That's what we call mature. Moving on, helping children understand the impact of their actions. We need to connect actions and consequences. The talking you do is not teaching. It's connecting dots. You're walking alongside them. For example, if they choose not to clean the room, discuss how this impacts everyone, right? They leave all their stuff out in a shared bedroom, and it impacts their brother, who might trip over it, or the dog who might eat it, stuff like that. Reflection on decisions. So after an outcome, take time to reflect with your kid what actually happened. You can frame this. You can frame this in a positive light or a negative light. So if it's a failure, frame it in a positive light, like, no, now you learned. Hopefully this is the last time you have to learn this lesson. If it's a positive thing, say, wow, what do you think caused this? Like, you did this. You were able to complete this. I don't know. This course online through this app. What did it for you? And then you're just having them speak to whatever it was that led to that result, and now you're connecting the dots. And I think that's really good. Moving on. We need to create a safe space for failure. I've referenced this multiple times, but normalize mistakes. Make it clear that failure is a natural part of the learning process. In fact, it's just a step to success. Encourage your child to make mistakes and see them as opportunities for growth rather than something to fear. This is one big critique I have of the school system, which is everything's fear-based. It's top-down instruction. They say, if you don't do what we tell you to do, which is for your benefit, quote unquote, arguably. If you don't do what we tell you to do, you will be penalized, right? If you make a mistake, then they learn they learn to fear mistakes. I can't mess this up. I have to be perfect. We create perfectionists who are not self-starters because they wait for the top to tell them what to do, and they're scared to make a mistake because it will be a poor reflection on them. Where I prefer to try and frame the task at hand. Let's say they wanted to learn how to do algebra. Well, I point out all the ways that algebra would be beneficial in their life, how it's going to help them be that engineer or doctor or whatever astronaut. I think those are all things that my kids are interested in, that they're going to need it. And then it's going to help them in normal situations as well. And as we go over and set that target, we go over and say, well, we got to learn about it first. So let's learn about this and let's figure out all the ways this can go wrong so we know how it goes right. All right, here's a problem. And they don't follow the order of operation, right? I give them an algebra problem. They don't understand order of operation. They do it all wrong. And there's a learning lesson. I'm like, good. So you got this one right if it were written like this. But here, there's something called the order of operation. Let me show you. These mistakes are just the next step to learn. Hey, you won't make that mistake again. Try another one. Make it fun. It's not supposed to be scary. Get rid of that shame from failure. Ensure your kids know that they won't be judged for their mistakes, give constructive feedback that's encouraging. And I think it's okay to say, no, that's the wrong answer. They need to hear that they got stuff wrong. I think there's a whole generation of kids who never heard they did anything ever wrong. They were always perfect. And now we have these people walking around thinking they're never wrong. And you can't tell them they're wrong. They're too scared. They actually break down in tears if you tell them they're wrong. You get a call from their parents as the employer. I'm not kidding. I've seen this happen. It's ridiculous. But it's the way the world works right now. And if you teach your kids to accept criticism, it's going to be a superpower. In fact, that's been one of my superpowers. Is I found people who are knowledgeable, who would give me feedback that was both positive and negative, but it was truthful. And when I say negative, I mean they tell me where I'm wrong. And I didn't care how rough around the edges they were telling me. I mean, obviously, it would have been nice if I heard it in a nice way, but the main goal was to learn where I'm wrong. And if I learned where I was wrong, I can actually then learn how to be right. And I found that was a superpower of mine. So just seek out a more knowledgeable person than you, find where you're wrong, and there you go. And give it to me straight. Don't sugarcoat it. Nope, that's wrong. Moving on. On that topic, build resilience. We need to teach our children that resilience is a key to personal responsibility, that you can trip, you can make mistakes, and still get back up. That life is long enough to be able to make a lot of major mistakes. But as long as you get back up, those setbacks will hopefully not happen again because you learned your lesson. You can keep moving forward. Next, I want to talk about balancing responsibility with freedom. So responsibility earns freedom. This is the big thing that in my head, they are opposite ends of the spectrum. You either have a lot of freedom with responsibility. I hope I'm saying this right. You either have a lot of freedom with responsibility, and on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have no freedom and no responsibility. So if you want freedom, you have to be responsible. Explain to your child that if they show responsibility, they're able to do more. Make sure you point that out when they actually get this. For example, if they're able to care for something, like maybe care for something that is fragile, that they'll get more opportunities to play with that fragile thing. Like maybe it's the computer, right? They're using the computer. They've used it well in the past. Well, now they're going to get more time on the computer. We need to also let go gradually to allow our children to be more responsible. We need to let go of our control, give them more freedom, step back and let them have more control over their decisions so that way they can learn from their mistakes and be more responsible. This gradual release is probably the wisest way because it builds trust in both you and them, and it allows them to figure out exactly their limits of where their abilities are not serving them well and they need to make some mistakes. So it's to learn from it. And this way you minimize the catastrophe that could be on the other end if you allow them to take it too far. For example, you're not going to put your 10-year-old in charge of making dinner every night and that you're completely relying on that child for that. They might make something that goes alongside dinner, but if they didn't do it, like maybe they make the vegetable. If they don't do it, it doesn't affect the entire household, if you know what I mean. I think I'm going to stop there. Yeah, because we're running up on time. So let me end with this. In the future, your child will be on their own. You can go over and try and shelter them from everything, all the consequences, all the failure. And they probably grow up pretty happy to a point. But you're doing them a disservice. They're going to get out on their own. They're going to be 18 years old, and they're going to have the first time they can make decisions on their own. And they're not going to know how to make those decisions. They're not going to have learned in the safest place, your house, how to make mistakes, what mistakes they need to make in order to actually get it right the final time they actually get it right. I believe my household is the safest place for mistakes, so I want to go over and have them by the time they're, late teenager, before they move out, having the ability to run their own life, that they have a complete skill set, hopefully years before they leave my house, and responsibilities to match. So that way it's not a big transition and their life doesn't fall apart as soon as they go out for their freshman year in college because they didn't know how to take care of their life. So with that, I'm going to end today's episode. So stay curious, stay unschooled, and stay away from the algebra nightmares. I'll catch you in the next episode. So here's where we roll up our sleeves and bring out the big guns. If you support our mission, then please leave a review. On Unschooled Unleashed, we are talking about using a radical approach to education in today's world, and the more 5-star reviews we have, the more people will feel comfortable with the ideas, strategies, and principles we discuss. It gives legitimacy to our message, and the podcast's algorithm prioritizes us so we can reach more people. You may even have your 5-star review read on our podcast. Before I let you go, I have to pause and say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Your presence here is the fuel that ignites this movement. I am incredibly moved that you trust in us enough to click play. You, my friends, are the caped heroes in this story, the guardians of your family's learning journey, and a beacon of hope for your community. Be bold. Do what you think is best for you and your family. Thanks again for tuning in and taking this courageous leap outside of the box for this educational revolution. Welcome to the front line.